Welcome to the Future of Payroll and Workforce Management Insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com, where I am your host, and I am with my guest here, Karen Settembrino. Hello, Karen.
Hi, Brent. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today here at Congress. My name is Karen Settembrino. I am the product director for HCM for Alicia. I've been in payroll for over 40 years, and I can't believe I can say that. And I've been in the consulting world for 28 years, working both as a consultant and as a director in product management for Oracle. So thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk.
Yes, I am excited too, and I am so excited that you have agreed to do this episode. And yes, we are podcasting from the 44th Payroll Congress here in Nashville, Tennessee. Lots of interesting themes surfacing this week, and we're going to talk about AI a bit. But what I like to ask all my guests before we talk about the topic at hand is, what got you into this industry in payroll? I always hear people kind of fell into payroll. I'm curious what your story is and how you got to where you are now with Alethea.
So my story is kind of the same as pretty much everybody else you're going to hear from, or many people. Um, I, right out of high school, got a full ride scholarship to Pace University in New York, which is where I'm from, to be a large animal veterinarian. That was my goal in life. And due to circumstances out of my control, I had to not I had to drop out of school, and uh, I took a course in 12th grade bookkeeping 101, and I got a job doing payroll right out of high school. And when I started in payroll, I was working on punch cards. So my generational viewpoint of payroll goes back to punch cards, sitting and typing on the machines, running it through the machines, getting the reports on the green bar paper, and all of that, all the way through to the IBM System 36 and RPG coding, to PCs, to what we now can run payroll on our cell phones. I mean, who thought about it then?
Uh, that is quite the story. And I mean, to think about doing on punch cards, and now we're talking about artificial intelligence, and we're having a conversation, you and I are today, and we've heard this conversation this week and over the past couple of years, especially about artificial intelligence doing it for us. And I think that's what we want to talk about today. So we're hearing stories out there in the wild around this idea that artificial intelligence can conduct, basically conduct a gross to net on a global scale. That artificial intelligence is capable of doing that now. And you and I both know, especially you, the real granular details around just how many variables that actually entails. What does that actually mean, right? And maybe you can kind of dive into that and be a nice sort of way to get into this.
Sure. So from my perspective, and I was fortunate enough to attend the executive summit that payroll.org puts out. This is the third annual time during this Congress. And one of the conversations during that time was around the fact that AI, there is the capability, and it is there. It's just not prevalent right now to calculate the gross to net. Now, when we talk about calculating the gross to net, we're talking about all the pay rules, things like fair labor standards. We're talking about all the benefit rules when you have pre-tax deductions. You're talking about all of the um, jurisdictional legislation rules, and that could be US, that could be global. You're talking about taxation, all of that detailed information being able to be put into a bucket or a storage place where payroll systems can pull from it and actually calculate the gross to net for us.
It's quite a lot to think about, right? And, you know, it just begs the question. I mean, we've all used artificial intelligence at this point. If we're in certain professional circles, we use the large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, right, to help us pull together some report or pull together the first draft of something that we need to produce for what we do, right? And and even if it's in written work in my line of work, where I'm a business writer covering the payroll industry, right? And a podcaster, of course. I was just using Gemini the other day, this week, or it might have been late last week. But I asked it to do something for me, and it was fairly straightforward. It wasn't a particularly complex. It wasn't at all complex, actually. It was a very straightforward request, and it got it wrong 3 times, and it finally did get it right. It's because I paid attention. A, there was no way I would have messed it. So that's really important here, right? But I finally got it to do the right thing, right? But every single time it produced the result, it produced it with what I would, if it were a person, I'd characterize it as, extreme confidence, as if it were correct. It it just makes me wonder, what are we inviting when we sort of leave AI to do something as consequential as payroll when it has this propensity?
Well, I agree with you, Brent, in that the fact that there is this opportunity for the results to be incorrect. And one of the things that was talked about in the executive summit was the biggest part of payroll is trust. And if you get paychecks wrong, if you get information wrong, you're affecting people's pay, their livelihood. And I know when we had this discussion at the table yesterday, I know the point was brought up from a person in a younger generation that the technology is there and it's going to be around in, they said, 18 to 24 months that this is actually going to be usable. It is already out there. And there were those of us in an older generation, me, I'm a baby boomer, and others at the table that are from the show me state. We always say test and verify. And the question around using AI to calculate a gross to net with all of the complexities and then bringing it back to, okay, how do we trust it? How do we know? Yeah, we can test a single scenario and see it works. But when you're talking about thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people's paychecks that you have to run at a time, how do you verify it? How do you trust it? And my statement to the table, and there were others that agree with me, but again, there's a younger generation that has a little bit more trust in the technology. My question was, okay, how are you gonna get all of the legislative rules? And I'm not just talking about taxation, I'm talking about things like when in California, when you have overtime over X number of hours, all of these rules that affect pay that we as payroll people have to be aware of and comply with. How are you gonna get that all into a system to know automatically and to be able to process without human intervention? And that's a big question for me.
It is a big question, and it's interesting to contemplate where we could be headed and where we definitely have no choice but to be headed, to be headed. But in any event, and I'm of the opinion that we shouldn't forget that we have a choice in this. There's the constant drumbeat of AI, and AI is going it's just kind of this sort of malaise kind of thing in the background where, "Oh god, AI can do that now. It's only so long." It's become sort of like a dark humor joke amongst everybody, and, especially in the white collar world, right? Where, wow, AI is gonna be able to do everybody's job. When is it? And this is where I think it's really interesting because that in and of itself, sometimes I wonder if it's whether it is an intended, outcome, byproduct of the large AI companies' marketing strategy. I wonder if that's what they want us to be thinking, right? A. B, w hypothetically, what would we lose if we ended up going down that path and kind of just kind of resigning ourselves to it, right? At some point, you need humans to have you need that institutional knowledge stored in human brains, not computers.
I agree with you 1,000%. One of the people at the table yesterday is a person that works in an industry where it's not just regulated by governmental agencies, but there are regulations for this particular person's job that come from lawyers and contracts. And we're talking high dollar contracts. So this is not something that um, AI is going to know, because it's not something that they could go out and learn, like pulling in all legislative data. And that was one of the questions I honestly had to the person that was talking about this is, how is the system going to pull the data? And what happens when something changes? A law changes, a rate changes, something like that. And this person said basically there are these programs that will go out and pull the data into the database. But it begs the point of, okay, so it's going to go and pull out and put the information in. But how do we as payroll people validate that that's the correct information? There is so much riding on the success of payroll that I as a um I as a payroll person who believes in having to validate and verify information, I would have a very hard time trusting the system to do it automatically for me. And to me, even though I'm part of the baby boomer generation, to me, my feeling is that um, as we go down this path, and yes, we're headed down a path, and I totally agree that AI could work with things like, how does my payslip work? Can you explain to me what my balances are? Absolutely, 1,000% that works. But doing the actual calculation, if we're headed down that path, a person like me and the next generation coming up, how are they gonna know compliance? How are we gonna transfer this information? the session yesterday, the general session yesterday, there was a gentleman talking about the differences in the generations and how it works for us. I mean, that's exactly the point of this. One of the statements said at the very end is the baby boomers can't retire because we're going to lose all of this information. I truly believe that.
No. That yes. And one thing that really strikes me about all this is, well, a couple of things, right? So, first of all, efficiency, right? There's efficiency, newfound efficiency in having an AI large language model as a prosthetic for the payroll department to help the payroll department communicate information to employees about so that they understand their check better. And that's, it ends up being baked into the employee self-service portal and all that kind of stuff, which is great. I'm all for that too.
Absolutely.
Um, that's so newfound efficiencies are good. But is there a Rubicon we should not cross when it comes to efficiency in general? And right, and is gross to net calculation on global payroll, that seems to me to be, or any payroll seems, if you're a large national company, seems to be one of those lines not to be crossed, or that, excuse me, that we should be thinking about not crossing. A and B, I just want to kind of, well, there's something else I want to share around this, but first of all, actually, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
So, yes, I agree that the gross to net calculation is not something that should be left to an AI system. I totally support that avenue, but I think AI is useful in doing auditing and reconciliation. That's where I think the use of AI. You reconcile to your general ledger. You make sure you put audits in that says, give me anybody who earned more than 5% than the last paycheck. Those are the types of things I think AI will work really well for. But doing the actual calculation, I think that is the Rubicon that you were talking about. I do not think we should cross that line.
I'm gonna put it out there that I agree. I agree. And it gets to a bigger question is what are we going to just decide that we're gonna keep doing as humans and not let the AI do, whether it's in payroll or anything else. I was watching the news, I think it was in February, and the Pentagon, the US defense, they were testing AI models, wargaming various AI models, just using them in war games, right? And the AI chose nuclear weapons. The AI seems to like nuclear weapons in war games, which is kind of scary, right? Do 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 do, right? It
Yeah,
does Twilight Zone music. Um, and it occurred to me that yeah, okay, you know what? Maybe we should not. Maybe we should leave war to humans and not let AI do war. And for a similar reason, not to be too cheeky or funny here, but in a dark humor kind of way, but for a very similar, an analogous reason, I would say, I don't think we should have AI doing like calculating payroll
I
for,
agree.
yeah,
I agree wholeheartedly. I think, and as much as talking through this, and as much as it seems like it's a generally generational holdback or a mindset, I think it's going to come to a point where it's gonna be proven that AI is not gonna be trustworthy as much as having some human intervention, and that's where I'm not saying that it should be calculated manually. I think I think there has to be points where humans intervene to do validation and to do verification and to ensure, and again, I look at payroll. When I run payroll, I am affecting every single person's life, their livelihood. And to me, you know, long after I retire, if they want to do that, that's not my decision. But in my lifetime, in my work lifetime, to me, that is a huge risk. And I don't like that risk. And again, trust is the biggest thing that payroll brings to any company, whether it's a one person company or a 1 million employee company. Trust is the most important thing.
Payroll is more than a calculation, right?
Oh, yeah.
You've been on my podcast before, and you said that you cut your arm and you bleed payroll, right? Um, and there's something to be said about that. There's something to be said about the empathy, the human emotion of the person who is calculating the payroll that the AI just doesn't have. It's the same reason the AI keeps choosing nuclear weapons in war games, because it's just a calculation to AI.
Exactly. There is no human aspect to it. It is purely a computer generated program. There's no empathy, there's no sympathy, there's no opinions. It's strictly X's and O's. And I'm going back to my RPG days, and that's what I learned: X's and O's. An X means yes, and an O means no. And so, honestly, I mean, I would be very disappointed to see that the human piece of it is taken out of that calculation, in the sense that I truly believe there still needs to be, and it's not just because of positions and jobs and not because of who I am and the fact what I do, but I just think there is this trust component of all of this that is gonna go away with this aspect of it.
You are so right. You are so right. This is a conversation that needs to happen a lot more immediately in the payroll profession. And I want to thank you so much, Karen, for joining me for this episode of the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it, and this is a great opportunity for me to be a part of the podcast and to help out with the future of payroll and HR.com.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at HR.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.